The courier didn't even wait for a signature. He just slid the manila envelope across my kitchen table and walked away. It was the quietest ending to the hardest chapter of my life. I'm David Miller, 47 years old, and I'd just finished my last round of chemo the day before. I own half of Miller & Associates Construction Supply here in Indianapolis. Built it from nothing over 22 years. The house felt different that morning. Too quiet. Sarah's coffee mug sat untouched by the sink. Her side of the bed was already made when I woke. Military corners like she'd never slept there at all. The January light came through the windows thin and cold, casting shadows across yesterday's unopened mail. I should have been celebrating. Treatment was over. The doctor said I had a good shot. Instead, I was staring at an envelope that felt heavier than it should. You know what's funny about betrayal? It doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It creeps in through the small spaces, the unanswered calls, the empty refrigerator, the way your wife suddenly needs to work late every night for 3 months straight. Sarah had been sleeping in the guest room since November. "So you can rest," she'd said. "You need your space to heal." My best friend Tom stopped returning my calls around the same time. 20 years of friendship, and suddenly he was too busy to check on a guy going through cancer treatment. His real estate office was only 10 minutes away, but I hadn't seen him since Halloween. Maybe I should have connected the dots sooner. The envelope sat there like a loaded gun. I could smell the faint antiseptic scent that had clung to my clothes for months. Hospitals have a way of marking you. My untouched breakfast was getting cold, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking enough to pick up the fork. Here's the thing about chemo. It teaches you patience. You sit in that chair for hours, poison dripping into your veins, and you learn to wait, to endure, to keep your mouth shut when everything inside you wants to scream. I opened the envelope. Divorce papers, signed, dated, filed, the works. There was a note clipped to the front page, written in Sarah's careful handwriting. "Please, let's keep this amicable. I deserve a fresh start. Sarah." The world didn't explode. It just got very, very small. I sat there listening to the kitchen clock tick. The same clock we'd bought for our first apartment 15 years ago. Tick, tick, tick. Each second measured and counted, like the drip of an IV bag. What is the worst part about getting blindsided? It's not the shock. It's the sudden clarity that follows, realizing all the signs were right there in front of you, written in a language you'd forgotten how to read. I didn't call her, didn't text, didn't break anything or punch a wall or do any of the things you see in movies. I read every single page, twice. Petition for dissolution of marriage, division of assets, spousal support, community property claims on my business, the company I'd built with my own hands, one contract at a time. She wanted half of everything. That night, I lay in bed watching headlights slide across the ceiling, cars passing by, people going somewhere, living their lives while mine came apart in slow motion. The guest room door stayed closed. Sarah didn't come home. When morning came, I walked to the bathroom and opened the medicine cabinet. All those pill bottles lined up like tiny soldiers. Anti-nausea, pain management, vitamins to rebuild what the chemo had torn down. My wedding ring was sitting in the small plastic cup where I'd been keeping the morning pills. I picked it up, felt its weight. 22 years of marriage reduced to 14 grams of gold. Then I set it back down and walked away. Some decisions don't need witnesses. I found the closet 3 days later. Sarah's side was empty. Every dress, every shoe, every trace of her gone. The hangers hung there like question marks, asking questions I already knew the answers to. But she'd left something behind. A small slip of paper, folded once, sitting on the shelf where her jewelry box used to be. Tom's new address, written in her handwriting. The settlement meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Sarah's lawyer had called my office directly. Professional courtesy, he'd said. Like this was just another contract negotiation. I arrived 10 minutes early, Sarah walked in 5 minutes late, laughing at something on her phone. She looked good, rested, like someone who'd been sleeping well for months. Her lawyer was a sharp-dressed guy from downtown, the kind who charges by the quarter hour and knows it. He laid out their position with the precision of a surgeon. Community property laws, spousal support calculations, business valuation methods. Sarah wanted half the company, half the house, half of everything I'd built while she was finding herself. The business was established during the marriage, her lawyer explained. Mrs. Miller contributed significantly to its growth and success. I watched Sarah nod along, playing the supportive wife who'd sacrificed her own career. The performance was flawless. What really got me was how confident she looked. Not nervous, not guilty. Confident. Like she'd already won and was just waiting for me to figure it out. The next morning, I walked into my office and felt the chill immediately. My foreman, Jake, barely looked up from his clipboard. My office manager, Carol, found sudden interest in her computer screen when I passed her desk. Even the guys in the warehouse seemed to have forgotten how to make eye contact. 22 years building this place, and suddenly I was the outsider. How long had Tom been talking to them? What had he told them about me, about Sarah, about the divorce? Real estate brokers are professional talkers. They know how to plant seeds, water them, watch them grow. I kept my door closed that day and made a list. Every employee Tom had contact with, every vendor he might have influenced, every relationship that suddenly felt different. The numbers painted a picture I didn't want to see. My phone rang at 8:47 p.m. David, it's Lisa. Lisa Grant had been my accountant for 12 years. Steady, thorough, the kind of person who remembered every decimal point and never missed a deadline. If there was anyone left I could trust, it was her. "We need to talk," she said. "Not at the office. Can you meet me at Murphy's Diner on West 16th? Tomorrow night, 9 o'clock. Murphy's was the kind of place where the coffee was strong and the booths had high backs. Lisa was already waiting when I arrived, a manila folder sitting on the table between us. She looked tired, older than I remembered. "You need to see this," she said quietly, sliding the folder across the scarred formica. Inside were photocopies of emails, dozens of them. Sarah's email address at the top, Tom's at the bottom. The dates went back 14 months. 14 months. Before my diagnosis, before the first round of chemo, before I knew anything was wrong. "We should wait until after his treatment," one email read. "He'll be weak, distracted, less likely to fight." Another, "The consulting invoices are working perfectly. He trusts you completely, never questions the payments." Tom's response, "Keep track of everything. We'll need documentation for the settlement." My hand stayed steady as I turned the pages. Years of sitting in chemo chairs had taught me control, but inside something was crystallizing. Cold and sharp and absolutely certain. There were invoices. Real estate consulting fees paid to Tom's shell company. Work that was never performed. Contracts that existed only on paper. Small amounts, spread over months. Nothing dramatic enough to trigger an audit. And there, at the bottom of the stack, was the loan agreement I'd signed during my third round of treatment. October 15th. I remembered that day, barely able to hold a pen, Sarah holding my other hand, telling me it was just paperwork for the business restructuring. Tom's signature as witness, Sarah's as beneficiary. He'd borrowed against my own company to fund their future together. "How long have you known?" I asked Lisa. 6 months. Maybe longer. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I should have said something sooner, but... Was what? "You were dying, David, or we thought you might be. I couldn't add this to everything else you were carrying." I closed the folder, set it down gently, like it might explode. "I need everything," I said. "Every transfer, every invoice, every receipt, every piece of paper with either of their signatures on it." Lisa nodded. "What are you going to do?" I stood up, put on my coat, left a 20 on the table for coffee we hadn't touched. "I'm going to let the numbers speak for themselves." The drive home was quiet. No radio, no distractions. Just me and the road and the slow burn of absolute clarity. I called my lawyer from the kitchen phone, the same phone Sarah had used to coordinate this whole thing. "Jim, it's David Miller. We need to change our strategy." "What did you have in mind?" I looked at the folder sitting on my kitchen table. All those carefully planned betrayals, documented in black and white. "We're not fighting this," I said. "We're going to give them exactly what they're asking for." Settlement day arrived with the punctuality of a funeral. I was early, 7:30 a.m., for an 8 o'clock meeting. My folder sat on the conference table like a loaded weapon. Every document Lisa and I had gathered over the past 2 weeks arranged in perfect order. My tie was straight, my hands steady. The room smelled of printer toner and cold coffee. Sarah arrived at 8:07 in Tom's BMW, laughing at something he'd said in the parking lot. She wore the blue dress I'd bought her for our anniversary 2 years ago. Strategic choice, playing the wounded wife while driving her lover's car. Tom stayed in the background, leaning against the wall like he belonged there. 20 years of friendship, and now he looked at me like I was a stranger. Sarah's lawyer spread his papers across the table with theatrical precision. Settlement offer, asset division, spousal support calculations, everything designed to cut my life in half and hand her the better piece. "Mr. Miller," he began, "we're prepared to be reasonable, but Mrs. Miller is entitled to her fair share of the marital assets." I nodded, opened my folder. "I agree completely," I said. "She should get exactly what she's entitled to." The first document I placed on the table was a complete financial audit prepared by Lisa. Every transaction, every transfer, every penny that had moved through Miller and Associates for the past 18 months. Sarah's lawyer glanced at it, then looked again. "What is this?" "Due diligence," I replied. I wanted to make sure we had accurate numbers for the settlement. Page by page, Lisa's work told the story. Consulting fees paid to Pinnacle Real Estate Solutions, Tom's shell company. 47 invoices over 14 months totaling $73,000, 0 cents. Work that was never performed, contracts that existed only on paper. Sarah's signature on every authorization. The second set of documents hit the table like dominoes falling. Business restructuring papers filed 2 years ago, right after Tom's first casual questions about company ownership. Legal documents Sarah had never seen, creating a trust structure that technically removed my ownership shares from marital property. She'd been planning to steal half of something that was no longer legally mine to give. Sarah's lawyer was reading faster now, his polished confidence starting to crack. Sarah herself had gone very still, her hands flat on the table. "There seems to be some discrepancy in the financial records," her lawyer said carefully. "No discrepancy," I replied, "just documentation." The third folder contained the real surprise. Corporate bylaws from Miller and Associates, the originals, and then photocopies of the versions Sarah had tried to file during my illness. She'd attempted to grant herself voting rights in the company, tried to change ownership percentages, forged my signature on legal documents while I was too sick to notice. All illegal without my actual consent. Tom shifted against the wall, sweat visible on his collar despite the air conditioning. Sarah's smile had completely disappeared, replaced by something that looked like fear. The consulting work Tom performed was legitimate, Sarah said, her voice tight. Market analysis, property evaluation. I placed the final document on the table. A simple affidavit from 3 separate property owners, stating that Tom had never contacted them, never performed any evaluations, never provided any services whatsoever. His consulting work was pure fiction. The room went quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of traffic outside. Sarah's lawyer was no longer reading. He was calculating, probably wondering how fast he could distance himself from a client who'd committed documented fraud. "These allegations are serious," he said finally. "We'll need time to review." "Take all the time you need," I said. "The numbers don't change." I signed exactly 3 documents: the divorce decree, accepting no fault, a property settlement agreement, keeping what was legally mine, a release of claims, waiving any future demands on assets obtained through illegal means. Everything else I left unsigned. Sarah's hand trembled as she reached for her pen. Her lawyer whispered something urgent in her ear, probably advising her to cut her losses before this became a criminal matter. What's funny about betrayal is how quiet it becomes when exposed. No shouting, no dramatic confrontations, just paper shuffling and pens scratching and the slow realization that someone's world is falling apart. I stood up, buttoned my coat, gathered my papers. The meeting was over, whether they knew it or not. As I walked toward the door, I passed Tom for the first time in months. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. 20 years of friendship reduced to this moment. Him sweating in a borrowed office while his schemes collapsed around him. I nodded once, old habit. He didn't nod back. The hallway was empty, my footsteps echoing on polished floors. Behind me, I could hear Sarah's voice rising, then her lawyer's quiet response. Problem was, there was nothing left to argue about. The law doesn't care about feelings, it cares about facts. I had the facts, they had excuses. Outside, the February air was cold and clean. I sat in my truck for a moment, watching people walk past on the sidewalk. Normal people, living normal lives, untouched by the small earthquake that had just rearranged my world. My phone buzzed. Text message from Lisa. How did it go? I typed back, exactly as planned. Some victories are quiet. Some justice comes with a whisper instead of a shout. I started the engine and drove back to work. There was a company to run, and for the first time in months, it was mine alone. The follow-up meeting lasted exactly 17 minutes. Sarah sat across from her lawyer, documents spread before her like evidence at a crime scene. Her face had lost all color. The confident woman from settlement day replaced by someone who finally understood the depth of her mistake. Her lawyer's tone had shifted completely. No longer an advocate pushing for advantage, just a witness documenting the inevitable. Ms. Miller, I have to advise you that these financial irregularities constitute potential criminal fraud. My firm cannot continue representation if you proceed with contested claims. 2 weeks later, the court hearing was scheduled for 2:00 p.m. on a Tuesday. I arrived early and took a seat in the back corner. Sarah and Tom sat at the defendant's table, both in their best clothes, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Patricia Hayes, 23 years on the bench, known for reading every document and asking questions that cut straight to the truth. The prosecutor laid out the evidence methodically: company fraud, embezzlement, collusion between spouses and third parties, each invoice, each forged signature, each illegal transfer presented step by step, like building blocks of a case. Sarah's new lawyer, her third since the settlement, tried to minimize the damage. Your Honor, these were misunderstandings, accounting errors. Judge Hayes held up her hand. You cannot take what you never built, she said, her words slow and deliberate. These were not errors. They were systematic deceptions designed to defraud a legitimate business owner during his medical treatment. Tom's real estate license was suspended that afternoon. Sarah's claims against my company were dismissed with prejudice. The judge's final words echoed in the courthouse hallway: fraud vitiates all contracts. What's interesting about public humiliation is how quickly it spreads through a community. Sarah's new circle of friends, the yoga class ladies, the neighborhood book club, learned the truth within days. Turns out nobody likes being associated with someone who steals from their cancer-stricken husband. Tom's client list evaporated even faster. Real estate is built on trust, and trust doesn't recover from criminal fraud charges. His for sale signs started disappearing from front yards across Indianapolis. The Indianapolis Business Journal picked up the story on Thursday. Real estate scandal exposes local couple in fraud scheme. The article was 3 paragraphs buried on page 7. No photos, no dramatic headlines, just facts. Embezzlement charges, dissolved marriage, suspended license, the kind of quiet disgrace that follows people forever. I was never quoted, never appeared in any photos. My name was mentioned only as the victim of the scheme. Sometimes the most powerful position is the one nobody sees. The company board met the following Monday to review Lisa's audit findings. 5 minutes of discussion. Unanimous vote. Sarah Miller is permanently barred from holding any ownership interest in Miller & Associates Construction Supply. Corporate paperwork can be beautiful in its precision. 3 months later, the civil court rendered its final judgment. Sarah's divorce settlement denied. Her claims of community property rejected. Her demand for spousal support dismissed, citing fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. The judge's written opinion was 12 pages of legal analysis that boiled down to one simple truth. Criminals don't get to profit from their crimes. I watched from the courthouse steps as Sarah emerged alone. Tom was nowhere to be seen. Last I'd heard, he'd moved to Fort Wayne to live with his brother. Her BMW had been towed for unpaid insurance. The house she'd been renting with money stolen from my company was in foreclosure. She stood on the courthouse steps for a long moment, looking lost. 24 years of marriage reduced to a woman in a wrinkled dress, holding a purse and nothing else. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel revenge. I felt like watching the end of a movie I'd already seen. Inside the courthouse, in the judge's evidence box, my old wedding ring sat tagged and sealed among the other exhibits. Evidence item 47. In the case of Miller v. 14 grams of gold that once meant forever, now just another piece of documentation in a fraud case. Sir, the clerk asked if I wanted it returned after the appeals period expired. I told her to keep it. Some things are better left buried in bureaucracy. The drive back to work was quiet. No radio, no distractions. Just me and the road and the strange lightness that comes after carrying something heavy for too long. My office looked the same as always. Same desk, same chair, same view of the construction yard. But the air felt different, cleaner somehow. Lisa knocked on my door at 4:30. The audit's complete, she said. Every discrepancy accounted for, every stolen dollar documented, the books are clean. I nodded. What's the damage total? $73,000 in direct theft, maybe twice that in legal fees and lost productivity. Small price for 24 years of lies. One more thing, Lisa said. Jake and Carol want to apologize. They said Tom fed them a lot of stories about you during the divorce. They feel terrible. I looked out the window at the yard where Jake was directing a delivery truck. Same guy who'd been running crews for me for 8 years. Temporarily led astray by a smooth-talking real estate broker. Tell them we're good, I said. Some mistakes are understandable. Lisa smiled and closed the door behind her. The sun was setting over Indianapolis, painting the sky the color of old brick. My city, my company, my life. All of it mine again, legally and completely. Justice doesn't always come with a gavel. Sometimes it comes with an audit report and a judge who reads every document. Sometimes that's enough. I returned to my office at 9:47 p.m. on a Thursday. The building was empty, the city quiet beyond the windows. Street lights painted yellow squares across my desk where the final set of divorce papers waited. Decree absolute, signed and sealed by Judge Hayes. 24 years of marriage reduced to 8 pages of legal text. I unlocked the bottom drawer of my desk and placed the papers inside, next to tax returns and insurance policies and all the other documents that mark a life lived in careful increments. Behind those papers sat something I'd forgotten about. A leather planner from last year, still wrapped in plastic. Sarah had bought it for me in January, right before my first doctor's appointment. For your recovery, she'd said. Plan your comeback. I'd never opened it. The leather was soft under my fingers, unused and perfect. I opened to the first page, pulled out a pen, and wrote 2 words inside the cover. It ends. I closed the planner, placed it back in the drawer, turned the key. Some rituals need no witnesses. The window by my desk faced west toward the construction yard. Headlights moved across wet pavement below. Late commuters heading home to families. To lives uncomplicated by betrayal and courtrooms and lawyers who charge by the quarter hour. For the first time in 8 months, I turned my phone off. No calls to return, no messages to answer, no emergencies that couldn't wait until morning. Just silence and the steady rhythm of my own breathing. The next morning I drove to the yard before dawn. The security guard, Ray, waved from his booth. "Early start today, Mr. Miller?" Something like that. I walked to the materials pile where we kept the bricks, thousands of them stacked in neat rows, waiting to become walls and foundations and structures that would outlast the people who built them. I picked one up, felt its weight. Solid clay fired in kilns, pressed into shape, designed to bear a load for decades without complaint. You can't fake the weight of honest work. The sun was coming up over Indianapolis, painting the eastern sky the color of new copper. The yard was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic and the sound of my own footsteps on gravel. Walked to the far corner where we'd broken ground on the new warehouse foundation. Concrete forms waiting to be filled, rebar grids that would hold everything together. From my jacket pocket, I pulled out the leather planner. No ceremony, no speeches, just a man burying the past beneath something stronger. I placed it in the corner of the foundation trench and covered it with a shovelful of dirt. By afternoon, concrete would flow over it, sealing it away forever. The future is unwritten, but it's mine alone to write. I dusted off my hands and walked back to the office. There was work to do, contracts to review, estimates to prepare, a business to run without the weight of someone else's lies. The morning was clear and cold. My breath made small clouds in the air, proof of life continuing forward. Behind me, the foundation waited for concrete. Ahead of me, the day waited for decisions only I would make. Some chapters end quietly. Some new ones begin with the simple act of showing up and doing the work. I unlocked my office door and turned on the lights. The future started now.